We love this gentleman as well. Always a pleasure to hang out with him quarterlies, and when he comes on the Megapod as well, he's always very generous with his time. He is the founder of what you knew as Football Outsiders. He is the creator of the proprietary stat DVOA, as we mentioned, looks at football on a play-by-play granular level, and now plies his trade at FTN Sports. It's the great Aaron Schatz, everybody. How you doing, Aaron?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. It's been a good season.
It has been a good season. Good season, when you say that, you mean just from a quality of play standpoint? What do you mean?
It's been an interesting season. I think it's been a good season for me. I'm happy in my new home, so life is good, man.
Happy in your new home is the best part of that. All right, before we get to, because the one thing we have alluded to you on this week, by the way, I don't know if you know this, is about your historical perspective on the Baltimore Ravens. Before we get to that, how would you, if you had a macro comment about this season thus far, which is, again, halfway-ish now that there's 17 games, what is it? What's the topic sentence of this season so far?
Offense is down.
Offense is down. That's simple.
Yeah, that's the topic sentence. I don't have a number for you, but obviously I think teams' red zone numbers are down as far as converting into touchdowns. Scoring is down a little bit. Rushing is down in particular. There was this feeling over the last couple of years that, rushing numbers were up. Maybe teams had sort of solved rushing a little bit. Now it's down again this year. So, that's the main story of the year. Unders are winning constantly.
Do we have a reason? Do we have a theory as to why that is?
The theory is that it is somewhat related to, one, the changeover in quarterbacks. No Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady retiring, the young guys, except for C.J. Stroud, not developing yet. The other is that it could have to do with the Vic Fangio style of defense, slowing teams down, right? Giving them shorter stuff, but fewer explosive plays. But that doesn't explain the problems in the red zone.
No, doesn't. Bend don't break doesn't explain necessarily why the don't break part doesn't happen or has happened. So, okay, let's talk about the Ravens. Saw earlier this week, you obviously do your overall DVO ratings, and you always are good at putting it in historical perspective. You go all the way back to 1981 now? 1981?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I mentioned, as far as, best teams through 9 weeks, you have your two best teams, period, of all time, the 2007 Patriots, the 1991 Skins. And through 9 games, you've got these Baltimore Ravens. You also, when you tweeted about it, though, had a little personal caveat to it. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah, it's kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? Like, you look at the list of the best teams of all time, and they just do not feel like they belong there. And I don't think they're this good. But they're the best team in the league. Like, even if you took 10 or 15% off of their rating, they're still the best team in the league. And we're all like waiting for them to quote unquote beat a good team without noticing that they've clobbered 3 good teams.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit is 6-2. Cleveland and Seattle are each 5-3. And Baltimore has clobbered those teams.
So, but in your tweet, didn't you, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to mischaracterize it, but didn't you even say, like, okay, well, you're right, even like you said here, they don't appear to be that team, but what is it that you worry about with them? What is in that comment?
I think that, first of all, offense being more predictive than defense, pass offense being more predictive than run offense, the biggest weakness of this team is pass offense, where they rank 11th. Right? But the pass offense has been better in recent weeks. There have been fewer drops. They've been healthier, right? Earlier in the season, they had some receiving injuries. They had some offensive line injuries. Things are better now. There's also the worry that Lamar Jackson will just get hurt, right? Like, that's what happened the last couple of years. Lamar Jackson got hurt. What I don't worry about is that they, quote unquote, can't do it in the playoffs just because in 2019 they lost. Like, history is filled with teams and quarterbacks that, quote unquote, couldn't do it in the playoffs until the year they did.
Until they do. That's exactly right.
Right. Like Steve Young in 94 or Peyton Manning in 06. Like, eventually talent wins out. Right. So I'm not worried about 2019. I'm more worried about injury, and I'm more worried about the last 2 years and the injury to Jackson possibility than I am about Jackson gets to the playoffs and suddenly he gets figured out.
9-1 to win the Super Bowl on the Ravens, to win the conference, cut that in half, plus 450. Do you like those bets?
Yeah, I mean, I went and ran our simulation, only I changed the Ravens so that instead of being way ahead of the rest of the league, they were tied with the Chiefs at number 1, which in the ratings that I use for the simulation, which still incorporates some preseason projections, mean they're actually lower, right? So that makes them like the third team, okay? Even if you run the simulation that way, they're like the number 4 possibility to win the Super Bowl. And like they have better odds than what Vegas is giving them. Even if I'm like really wrong about them, they're still a good.
Wow, this is fascinating with them. So last thing about the Ravens, let's compare them to the Ravens juggernaut that was the 2000 Ravens, which won the Super Bowl on really the strength of a phenomenal epic defense. Is this a better team than that overall? I guess they are based on your numbers.
Oh, God, yes. Absolutely, it's a better team. The 2000 Ravens were, their defense got super hot in the playoffs, right? So that regular season-wise, they're not actually one of the best defenses of all time. They're the best run defense of all time, but their pass defense was like second or third that year. I mean, very good, but not like historic. The offense is so much better. This team's offense is so much better than that team. This is the best Ravens team. This in 2019 are the best Ravens teams. And that's the thing, is that the best teams don't always win the Super Bowl.
They don't. Single elimination format will do that to you a lot. Okay, so your top DVOA teams are, we'll put them on the screen here, and as it shows, the Ravens are just way ahead of the number 2 Chiefs. 49.0% total DVOA on the Ravens, all the way down to 29.6% for the Chiefs. Which of the teams here, Aaron? It goes Ravens, Chiefs, for those not watching. Ravens, Chiefs, Niners, Lions, Bills are your top 5. Jags, Dolphins, Browns, Cowboys, Eagles, 6 to 10. Which is the other team besides the Ravens with it you look at with your eye test, and you're like, okay, we're vastly different from the consensus on this particular team, and here's why.
Well, the Eagles, obviously, because most people who do power rankings just depend on wins and losses, and they have the best win-loss record. And I feel like the Eagles are better than this. If you said to me subjectively, I think the Eagles are better than the Cowboys, I think they're better than the Browns, probably the Dolphins and the Jaguars. But they're not as good as they were last year. The pass defense in particular is not as good as it was last year. The pass rush hasn't been as good, and they really have a hole at third cornerback because of the injury to Avonte Maddox. And the secondary is a weak link system. You can always attack the weak link. So what you want is to be strong everywhere, not to have a weak link. It's weird, I know. People have complained. ESPN's FPI has the Eagles 7th, so we're not the only advanced stat that has them lower. I mean, obviously, their chances to win the Super Bowl are super high because they're 8-1, and you can't take that away from them. You can't change the past. But as far as going into the future, play-by-play suggests they're not as good a team as San Francisco or Detroit.
Wow, Eagles 10th on this. And then beyond the top 10, what's the team we'd be the most surprised about that you have high up?
There's not... for the most part, the winning teams are on top, the losing teams are on bottom, and the 4-4 teams are in the middle. I guess maybe Houston being 13th.
Well, that's about right, I think.
Because they're third passing. Stroud is having an amazing season, especially if you consider they're 31st rushing the ball. He is getting no help from the running game. Don't you always say rookie quarterbacks need help from the running game? He's not getting any.
It's almost like he should have been the first pick in the draft, Aaron. Almost like that. We'll come back. Aaron's thoughts on other awards like MVP, like Coach of the Year, what he likes best this week. More into the world of DVOA, contextualizing the NFL season thus far. Aaron Schatz right here on a numbers game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. We get tweets at Beating the Book. I just want to read this one while Aaron is here, and we'll get to the rest later. But this one, Aaron, is from Jeff Levine. No, that's the one. Jeff Levine is always pumping up the Ravens. He says, it's merely a rumor that Aaron Schatz has consulted with me on the Ravens status. But he said, can you ask him what factors drive their scores? And you don't necessarily have to ask it that way, but what we were talking about off air, Aaron, about you're not really 100% certain why you have them rated so much higher than other analytics outfits?
Yeah, because I've looked at like EPA-based metrics, and I know that like point differential, they're number 1, and the simple rating system at PFR, they're number 1. But like when you look at EPA metrics, offense, defense, passing, rushing, like our ranking is about the same as EPA. And yet at the same time, when you put it all together, I think we have we maybe have Cleveland and Baltimore's defenses more past the rest of the league than other metrics do. Other metrics have Cleveland and Baltimore closer to the rest of the league, but I mean, their running game is the best in the game. Their defense is second with a big gap between second and third. So that's what's driving it for the Ravens.
Is there a team on the flip side, when we go to the bottom portion of the league, is there a historical unit or team, like are the Cardinals or the Panthers reaching those levels?
No, the Giants are our worst team, but in general, the historical worst teams are worse than the best teams are great. So the Giants aren't like historically bad. They're just pretty bad for this year. And the Denver defense has been much better over the last 3 weeks. So the Denver defense is no longer historically bad.
Still time for the Giants, Aaron. Still time to become epically.
Well, Tommy DeVito.
Yes.
I mean, Tommy DeVito sounds like the guy they pulled out of the stands and like the replacements, like Shane Falco.
Yeah, well, they kind of did, I guess. Okay. Let me ask you about Week 10, your single best bet for Week 10 on a very tough week. I'm about to do the Megapod. I got to come up with 3 plays. I've got about 3, and that's where it ends. I don't know how I'm going to come up with 5. What's your best bet this week?
My projected lines came out so close to the Vegas lines this week. It's just not a good week. My favorite bet of the week, and this involves a little bit of questioning because you don't know exactly how good the Vikings offense is with the backup quarterback now. But I like Saints minus 2.5 as the best bet of the week.
Oh, no.
And what I actually played was a teaser where I did Saints plus 3.5 combined with over 35.
Minnesota Vikings were my favorite play on guessing lines on Monday. That was my instinct on that. Wow. Okay, so we're oppo on that one. Saints for Aaron Schatz.
Yeah, we're opposite on that one because but it's a little weird because you're like, oh, look at what Dobbs did in his first game, but that doesn't mean Dobbs, the better guide to what Dobbs will do the rest of the season is Dobbs's history, not that one game.
Sure.
And the Saints have a good defense.
He's probably got to be a particularly tough guy to evaluate, though, right? Because, his stints are so staccato over the years, right?
The story, forget stats, just the story of last week's game is,
incredible.
They're going to need to do a documentary on just Josh Dobbs' 2023 season because it's so nuts.
It's amazing. All right, let's talk awards. You are an MVP voter. You are one of 50, so it is always fascinating to talk to you about this subject. Now, the format of the vote has changed. It is not just one guy for MVP. It's a top 5. Right now, we're not holding you to this. Let us make that clear. We're not holding Aaron Schatz to this after Week 9 of the NFL. But if the vote were right now, your vote would go to?
It is so hard. And this is going to sound crazy when you look at win-loss records. The most valuable player in the league this year has been Josh Allen.
You and Eager, our buddy Eric Eager, Dr. Eager, had it last week too. Same thing. What's with you people and your analytics? Really? That's your guy?
It's crazy because, the Bills' defense has been the worst in the league over the last month. And there's also that element of they've never really quite built the secondary receivers there, so he doesn't have as much to work with besides Stephon Diggs. But what he's doing on his own, he's not only number 1 in our stats, he's number 1 in ESPN's QBR, and he's number 1 in Pro Football Focus's grading system. So, these are 3 very different ways to measure quarterback. And Josh Allen is number 1 in each of those ways.
Aaron, he's 20 to 1.
Right now, he's the best. He's the best. Now, I don't know what's going to happen over the second half of the year with him and with the Bills' defense. And at a certain point, if the Bills are just 9-8, it's really hard to vote for him. But right now, he's been the best player in the league this year.
He's 20 to 1 in the betting market, Aaron. 20 to 1. There's 6 guys in front of him. I guess the other way of asking that is how bad would the Bills be without him, right? If they had a replacement level quarterback, what would this team be like with all these injuries?
Given the way the defense has fallen apart, bad. Yeah, really bad.
Real bad. Where would Tyreek Hill, just for giggles, where would Tyreek Hill end up in your top 5? Don't tell me he's not in your top 5, man.
4th or 5th, probably.
Okay.
It's so hard to vote for non-quarterbacks, but it does feel like Hill and McCaffrey deserve space, and possibly A.J. Brown, too. This is not an easy year. There really is no front runner or 2 front runners. There's a lot of interesting guys.
All right, last question about MVP. Who would be second to Josh Allen for you?
I think Mahomes, but maybe Lamar Jackson.
Okay. They are the co-short shots along with Jalen Hurts. Here's an even tougher one. Coach of the year, which is super duper subjective, right? Because you don't have stats besides a win-loss record to go by here. Who would be your? Now, I assume you don't vote for this one. Maybe I shouldn't assume that.
No, I do. I vote for all the ones. I vote for everything except executive of the year. Executive of the year is not an AP vote, but I vote for all the awards.
Wow. Okay, so this is all through the Associated Press. Gotcha. So how many people vote for Coach of the Year?
It's same people. It's the same people. 50 people.
Same 50 people. Is it 1 through 5?
We vote for all the awards, and we vote for the All-Pro team.
Okay. Is it 1 through 5 on Coach of the Year, too?
I think it's 1 through 3.
1 through 3.
I think MVP is the only one where we do 5.
Okay. 1 through 3. Who would be your Coach of the Year? We're not holding you to it. Who would be your Coach of the Year right at this moment?
I would probably lean towards Mike McDaniel. But I also like Dan Campbell and Kyle Shanahan. It's interesting because with McDaniel and Shanahan, it's what they do as offensive schemers. And with Campbell, it's much more about his aggressiveness on fourth downs and his management of the locker room.
This is fascinating. So you represent 2% of the vote. Do you have any sense of what the other 98% are thinking? If they're in line with you, generally not in line, or is there no way of knowing that?
No, there's no way of knowing. I will say there are more people on the panel now who understand analytics. So there's going to be more of an analytic view towards the voting than there used to be. There's Sam Monson from PFF. There's Doug Farrar. There's Mina Kimes. So things like fourth downs are going to play a bigger role in who gets Coach of the Year than they used to 5 years ago. But most of the people on the panel are not people that I know personally. I don't know, and it's not like I've gotten on the phone with Doug and we've talked about our picks.
There's not a caucus happening. Okay, so Mike McDaniel, Dan Campbell, Kyle Shanahan. All right, so offensive player of the year, you do that one as well. That's become a depository, as we say, for non-quarterbacks, the best non-quarterback. I'm going to guess this is the Tyreek Award at this point for you?
There's 3 candidates: Tyreek, Christian McCaffrey, and A.J. Brown. Those are the 3 guys.
Throw them up in the air at this point?
Throw them up in the air at this point.
Throw them up in the air. How about defense?
A.J. Brown has caught up with Tyreek over the last couple of weeks.
He has. How about defensive player of the year?
God, we always seem to give it to pass rushers, but I mean, it would be hard not to give it to Myles Garrett, considering the way how good he is every year. And then this year, the Cleveland defense is the best in the league. Myles Garrett, but I mean, any of those top 3 guys are really good candidates. Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, absolutely really good candidates.
Offensive Rookie of the Year, I would imagine, would be as close to a consensus CJ Stroud as anything right now?
Yeah, there was some debate about Puka Nacua, but over the last couple of weeks, I think Stroud has really pulled ahead.
Are you and for Defensive Player of the Year, are you a Witherspoon guy or someone else?
I have no idea right now.
No idea.
Player of the Year, but I will say Brian Knowles just wrote a whole thing about midseason, who's leading for awards. If you go to ftnfantasy.com/DVOA, and he thought Jalen Carter.
The best.
Yeah, defensive rookie of the year.
It's pretty much a Witherspoon versus Carter thing at this point.
Witherspoon, Carter, and there was one more, but I don't remember.
Linebacker for the Rams.
It might be the pass rusher for the Rams.
Yeah.
Byron Young.
That's right. Okay, Aaron, tell everybody. By the way, I hope the awards talk doesn't make you too uncomfortable at this time of year. We're not holding.
No,
yeah,
I'm fine.
All right. Where should people go to get all your FTN stuff, and what can they get there?
ftnfantasy.com/DVOA. The content is mostly free. To get all of the DVOA splits and historical numbers, you need either a Stats Plus subscription or a Fantasy Plus subscription, which gets you a lot of other really good fantasy data and charting data and a lot of stuff that helps you set up fantasy teams.
And if you forget any of that, you can go to Aaron's Twitter at @Schatz. That's ASCHATZ NFL, @Schatz NFL. He, of course, the Chief Analytics Officer at the FTN Network and a pioneer. Thank you so much, Aaron. Appreciate it, man.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.